you want to recommend this program for someone else, it'll be available within a few days. And we'll also be putting up links to associated resources that you might want to come to, to see that we've mentioned during the program. This workshop is part of an Upper Natchog Healthy Watershed Implementation Plan, which is a project being funded by the Connecticut DEP through a USDPA Clean Water Act 319 non-point source grant. Again, I'm Jean Pillow. I'm the project manager for this project. And we're doing this project in partnership with towns of Ashford, Eastford, Wyndham, and Woodstock. This shape over here is the shape of the Natchog watershed, and you can see approximately where the town line up within the watershed. It's a watershed that's 164 square miles and includes parts of 8 different towns. The Eastern Connecticut Conservation District is a not-for-profit natural resource conservation organization. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or you can find out more about our projects on our website at www.conservect.org/Eastern. As the name implies, we're the Eastern Conservation District. There are 5 conservation districts in Connecticut. We're created by state statute. We have obligations to focus on soil and water conservation. We serve the 36 municipalities in the eastern part of the state. The Natchog River is one of 4 watersheds that came up as high priority for an action plan development using metrics that was developed by EPA and DEP. They were scoring different indicators like ecological indicators, stress indicators, and social indicators, and put these numbers into a program, and 4 watersheds popped up as watersheds are worthy of keeping preserved as best possible. Those are the ones in blue, and the Natchog is nicely circled in purple. The gray watersheds are ones that have water quality issues, but they're a priority for restoration. And the yellow lines are streams that have impairments because of pathogen pollution. And so they also have their own priorities as well. What we're trying to accomplish is we want to map where all the streams, lakes, and ponds are that are not polluted. That's different from any of the watershed-based planning work I've ever done before. We usually work with the ones that are polluted. So this is a nice change of scenery. We want to recommend cost-effective methods to protect these put the wrong way, wheel mouse. How to protect these cost-effective methods to keep these high-quality waters in good condition. Using community outreach to make people more aware of what their resources are and the services that they provide. And then with community input, we'll be developing a healthy watershed implementation plan to come up with strategic strategies and anti-degradation measures. And there'll be a schedule of all the different things and what do we need to do next, and 10-year plan, and hopefully this is all going to work out really well by September. So you're all invited. You can follow updates on our social media sites. We developed social media sites specific to this project. We call them Naturally Natchog on Facebook, or at Naturally Natchog on Instagram. And you can also follow all the documents that we produce as part of this project on the ECCD website under Water Quality Investigations. Or you can just contact me, Jean Pillow, at comcast.net. So this evening we have 2 different presentations. We're going to start with Dr. Juliana Barrett of Connecticut Sea Grant, and her presentation is going to be on riparian buffers and their importance in Connecticut. Following Juliana's presentation, we're going to turn it over to Patrick and Bette Smith, who own property in the town of Woodstock, and left out the AN managers. Sorry about that. They have some wildlife video clips from the Fen, which is a 30-acre private nature preserve. So with that, I'm going to stop my share. And Juliana's going to put hers up.
Okay. There we go. Good evening, everyone. And thanks very much for having me this evening to talk about with riparian buffers. So as Jean said, riparian buffers or riparian corridors, riparian refers to that area along the banks of a river, stream, or other water course, whereas a corridor is sort of that designated zone or strip of land along the border of the water course. So putting that together, the riparian corridor is the natural vegetation and soil cover adjacent to a river, stream, or other body of water. When I'm talking about riparian corridors or buffers, I do use the terms interchangeably, and I'm not referring to a regulatory buffer. So this is just the ecological buffer or corridor that I'll be talking about. So here are examples of really nice riparian corridors, vegetated buffers. And here's what happens when we don't have them. And the idea of a buffer is not new. There's all different kinds of buffers. But in the 6th century, an area along Italy's coast between Rome and Naples was so popular and becoming so developed that Emperor Justinian passed an ordinance that prevented any building within 100 feet of the water in order to protect the viewshed. 14 centuries later, Cape Cod Building Authority passed an identical ordinance with a different purpose, and that was of protecting the environment. So not a new concept at all. So why should we care about creating, managing, or restoring riparian corridors? So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the different functions and values of this ecological system. And one of the first things is that having a riparian corridor, a vegetated one, is really the first line of defense against the impacts of impervious surfaces and that water flow getting into our wetlands and watercourses. Vegetated riparian corridors can slow runoff. They can protect shorelines from erosion, slow water velocity, filter and trap pollutants, and then also provide habitat and corridors for wildlife, as well as shade waters for fisheries. So Jean showed you a really nice picture, maybe from the Natchog River watershed. In terms of water quality, having vegetation along those higher order streams, way up, in the tops where our watersheds begin, is really the most critical. That's where we can have the most impact in terms of water quality. I mentioned steam bank stabilization can be a very important function of riparian corridors. Slowing that floodwater velocity. This is along a lake here, so shoreline protection and again, erosion control. And this has to do with impervious surfaces. So that surface runoff obviously is higher where there's increased impervious surfaces or cultivated areas. So here is a golf course, which is actually undergoing riparian corridor restoration along here this was down in Maryland. And something that we really need to think about in terms of impervious surfaces is not just the amount of impervious surface, but the slope and the texture of the soils. So biodiversity and buffers really go hand in hand. So having these riparian areas can really increase both aquatic and terrestrial habitat, help to protect some of these very sensitive habitats, restore connectivity. There are great opportunities for connecting riparian corridors and creating connections between areas. Increasing access to resources, and very importantly with climate change, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, providing shade to maintain water temperature. So here's just a few of our native animals that live in these riparian corridors. Very colorful group this evening. Riparian corridors do a couple of important things. And they provide woody debris for aquatic habitat structure. They maintain that in-stream microclimate, provide food for aquatic species, and again, help to protect water quality. So fisheries, again, this is very, very important. This is a group from Trout Unlimited, which has been doing a great deal of work on riparian corridors. And in this next picture, here's woody debris. This is one of my favorite pictures because this is actually people adding woody debris to an area that it's been removed from. We really, I think as a society, we tend to like things neat and tidy. And so when we see something like in the upper left-hand corner, we want to clean it up, but that woody debris is really critical for many organisms, but especially the larval stages of many insects. Buffers and soils go hand in hand. Those having these vegetated buffers can do a number of things, reducing that energy of water runoff, reducing wind energy, something we don't immediately associate with having vegetated buffers. They can help to stabilize the soils, improve water quality, and again, that very important filtration, removing soil pollutants. Again, something that we don't think too often about, but has been actually pretty widely studied, are the economic benefits of buffers. So in certain situations, having these riparian vegetated buffers can help to minimize property damage. They can help decrease public investment in stormwater management, flood control, and pollution removal. Studies have shown that they increase property values and reduce land maintenance costs. So by way of example, this is New York City down here. New York City gets its water supply from the Catskill Mountains. And instead of investing billions of dollars and then the ongoing maintenance costs in terms of building a drinking water filtration facility, what the city of New York did instead is they invested a fraction of that amount in the Catskill Mountain watershed for stream setbacks, stream fencing to keep cows out, for example, and a range of best management practices to help preserve the natural water filtration of these riparian areas. So I think that's one of the best examples of the economic benefits of these riparian areas. The Center for Watershed Protection has done a great deal of work on riparian areas, and they have documented that there are increased property values near riparian buffers. So the question everybody always asks, how big should a buffer be? Well, unfortunately, it depends, and it really depends on the site conditions and what the function of the buffer is. So as we've mentioned, a buffer can help to stabilize the bank, provide habitat, treat runoff, provide wildlife habitat. So we really have to look at what we want the buffer to do, and then we have to look at its location within the watershed. We have to look at the soil, the slope, the hydrology of the area before we can really get a good handle on how big a buffer needs to be. But this gives you at least some idea of how big some of these buffers need to be in order to get these different functions. And you're going to see a lot of these diagrams. So here, bank stabilization along the stream is ranging from 0 to 50 feet. Again, it depends on the slope, the site conditions, where in the watershed we are. Fisheries habitat could be a bit bigger because we want that water to be shaded, and we want the woody debris input, nutrient removal, sediment control, flood control, and so on. And obviously the largest is for wildlife habitat, ranging up to 300 feet. There's been more and more studies looking at how big a buffer has to be. And scientists have looked at very specific nutrients and how big buffers need to be to take out certain amounts, certain percentages of these different nutrients. And the bottom line is bigger is always better. But there are benefits that we can gain from smaller riparian buffers, such as between 25 and 50 feet or 15 and 50 feet, really helping to stabilize the stream bank, protecting water quality. And you can see here some small scale travel routes, that is corridors for wildlife. And then as you get bigger, that is wider in width, you're providing more of those ecosystem functions that just increase as the buffer gets bigger. What I want to show you is a study that's been done by CLEAR, the Center for Land Use Education and Research at UConn. And you can find this under the Changing Landscape tab. And Emily Wilson has done the majority of this work along with Chet Arnold. And so we can look at Connecticut and Long Island Sound land cover and change. There's data from 1985 to 2015, so 30 years worth of data. And if you go down to the Long Island Sound watershed, you'll get a couple of different tabs here, and one of those is riparian buffers. And what was done is to look at the water courses around the state and to buffer them, so 300 feet on either side. So here's what that can look like. And then we can look at the land use within those buffers, okay? So here's an example. This is in the Ledyard area. So here we have the 300-foot buffer along our wetlands and watercourses, and then we can look at the land use within those riparian buffers. And what's really exciting is we can look at land cover from 1985 to 2015, and we can look at the change over that 30-year period. So this is available for the entire state, so it would be really exciting to look at for the Natchog watershed. So here we are, again, looking at this riparian buffer, 300 feet on either side of the waterway, and the land use. So here for one particular basin that I picked, here's the 2015 riparian area land cover, the amount of forest, ag, turf, and developed land. Here it is in 1985. And then here is that change between 1985 and 2015. So in this one particular water basin that I chose, we've lost 94 acres of forest, 21 acres of ag field. We've gained 41 acres of turf and grass, so that's probably mostly lawn, and we've also gained 37 acres of developed land. So this is a really powerful tool, I think, to really take a look at our watersheds and look to see what is going on, how are things changing, what are we losing, and what are we gaining. So early on, I had mentioned climate change. So I want to talk a little bit about what riparian corridors have to do with climate change. So we know that air temperatures are rising, and as air temperature rises, our surface water temperatures are also increasing. This has been well documented. We're seeing changes in the magnitude and the seasonality of precipitation events, and then therefore of runoff. And we're seeing changes in our growing season and when plants are flowering, when they're leafing out. And through that, we're seeing changes in animal distributions. So warming in Connecticut, let's see. So our average summer and winter temperatures are projected to increase by over 5 degrees Fahrenheit relative to pre-industrial levels back in the 1800s. So here's another diagram. Basically, for our winter temperatures, the coldest winters in the future are going to be like the warmest ones we have had over the past recent years. And our hottest summers that we've been experiencing will become the coldest. So our average air temperature is increasing in both winter and in summer. Along with that, there's changes in the precipitation patterns. So less winter precipitation is projected to fall as snow and more as rain. That means a reduced snowpack, earlier breakup of winter ice on lakes and rivers, and earlier spring snowmelt, leading to those earlier peak river flows. So again, having riparian corridors well vegetated can be really helpful in helping to deal with some of these changes. Many of you have probably seen this map or a similar map. These are the observed changes in the total annual precipitation falling in those really intense precipitation events, or the top 1% of precipitation events. And from the beginning of the 1900s to 2016, there's been a 38% increase in the Northeast and New England in these really intense precipitation events. And we've certainly experienced these in most of Connecticut. So a little bit of positive news with those warmer air temperatures. There's been a change in our plant hardiness zones here in Connecticut, and our growing season is about 2 weeks longer now. Spring is coming earlier by about 2 weeks. But one of the difficulties with that is that we don't know when there could be a snap freeze, for example. And so it makes it very hard. While there's a lot of work going on in terms of agriculture and new potential crops and different vegetables that we could be growing, we don't have a good sense of when there could still be a freeze. So just to summarize in terms of climate change, riparian systems are naturally resilient to extreme weather events. These are areas that can flood and dry out. They function as corridors for many plants and animals, especially with climate change causing these distributional shifts in organisms. There's many organisms, birds, insects that are moving northward. These areas provide thermal refugia. Riparian areas absorb a lot of heat. Water has a very high heat capacity and can really help to protect certain organisms against these extreme temperature fluctuations. And then we have those hydrological benefits, helping to slow flood events, filtering water, runoff, increased infiltration, and I think all those benefits are just augmented as we see climate change occurring more and more. So I had mentioned Trout Unlimited, and this is another group here, planting shrubs in this case to help shade the waters, because our native brook trout really need those cooler water temperatures. As the air temperature is rising, our water temperatures are getting warmer, and so helping to shade the waterways will really help cool the water and allow things like brook trout to continue to flourish. So riparian corridors are for both coastal areas and inland areas. Just a few mentions about the coastal area. So again, riparian corridors are something that can be very, very important in these coastal areas, particularly with increases in sea level rise. Projections are 20 inches by 2050 of sea level rise, storm surge increasing, and flooding reaching further inland. As we increase sea level rise, our floodplains are actually getting bigger. So storm surge during flood events can move further and further inland. Intense storms are causing accelerated erosion of beaches and coastal dunes, and we're seeing degradation of coastal wetlands and possibly increased saltwater intrusion into wells, for example. So here you see a few examples of coastal erosion. Here is an exposed septic system, and on the right-hand side, the sand used to come up to this bottom step here. So when we look at our state, whether it's a coastal area or an inland area, we see very few riparian corridors. Sometime when you're on Google Maps, take a look at the at the imagery and take a look at some of the riparian areas that you know, the waterways that you know well, and just check out to see how those riparian areas look. So these are coastal setbacks. This was a study that was done looking at many different sources. So it was sort of a literature review to try to get different coastal ecosystem functions of these riparian corridors, and everything from erosion control to terrestrial habitat. This was a Canadian study, so it's all in meters. And you can see that there's some really big differences, big distances that are needed to get these different ecosystem functions. So where do we begin when we really want to start in on developing riparian areas or building them up or managing them better? So Jean showed a riparian brochure that I developed with a few other people. That's available online. There's also a coastal plant list, as well as an inland riparian plant list. So these are native plants that do well in these riparian areas that can withstand some flooding and can dry out at other parts of the year. And this was a coastal project, but I worked with a student of landscape architecture, and we created a number of cross sections and plan views so that people could see what their yards might look like. And this is the website up here. And so these are a few of the cross sections that were developed. These work really for coastal or inland. And here you can see the bird's eye view. The important thing, one of the things, again, whether you're on the coast or further inland, we often see lawn all the way to the water's edge. People want to have their water access and their view sheds. So what we were trying to do is show people how they could plant to still have that water access and those view sheds. And there's lots of ways to do this, but that was the whole point of this exercise here. So we want to avoid things like this, right? Whether it's coastal or inland. Here you can see a wall to the water's edge. Again. And here you can see that this very steep slope is being planted with vegetation. And here's another really nice riparian buffer that's completely vegetated. And over here is still the water access. And there's probably a pretty good view of the water as well. So it is possible to do. We don't have to have lawn all the way to the water's edge. And these are just two states, North Carolina. Now this is a regulatory buffer. Some states do have regulations on buffers. We in Connecticut do not, although we do have a 100-foot recommended buffer width. Sorry, that's my dog. So North Carolina has a 50-foot buffer minimum requirement, and although in some watersheds they have bigger requirements. Under the Vermont wetlands rule, buffer widths of 100 feet and 50 feet are required in class 1 and 2 wetlands. And in some cases, bigger riparian buffer widths are recommended. So there are some regulations. This is from the Connecticut River Watershed Bulletin, which has a number of real nice bulletins about riparian buffers. And what they show here is the benefits of grasses, shrubs, and trees in terms of these different ecosystem functions. And by far, trees planted along the riparian buffer provide the greatest benefits. So one of the things is that we often hear people don't want things to look untidy. They want things to look at least like they're being taken care of. And so there are ways to think about designing riparian buffers so that they still look maintained. And these are just a few suggestions. So with selective mowing can indicate stewardship. Again, maybe it's in the area that's closest to that's furthest away from the water. Using something like a fence, a wooden fence, a simple split rail fence, for example, can show that this area is actually being managed and it's not all wild. Using plants of different heights, textures, and forms, putting things in like nesting bird boxes and feeders, and using really bold plants, a lot of seasonal variation, and again, those textures to indicate that this is a design landscape. And because I'm in need of seeing some pretty things, I thought I would show you some of the trees, shrubs, and perennials that do very well in these riparian corridors. So these are all native plants. Obviously red maple, I won't go through them all, but these are all ones that do real well in these areas that dry out sometimes and flood at other times. Small trees, our shadbush that's blooming right now can be really beautiful in these areas. Some of the dogwoods, and there's several different types of the shad or serviceberry. Alders, buttonbush, the azaleas that'll be blooming pretty soon, silky dogwood. Many of these shrubs can do real well in riparian corridors. Then some real interesting ones. Ferns, a number of those do well. Again, you know, some like cinnamon fern doesn't like to be wet all the time, whereas sensitive fern can do pretty well under wet conditions. Some of the grasses with those really big root systems do extremely well to help hold soil and filter pollutants and do quite well in areas of riparian buffers. And then we get into the herbaceous plants. Again, some of these should be blooming pretty soon. A very wide variety from the white turtlehead to some of the irises. The irises have been shown to be really excellent at filtering quite a few pollutants out of waterways. Cardinal flower, really striking one, lobelia, and some of our asters and Joe pieweed. So those are just a few of the plants. And again, there is a riparian plant list for both coastal and inland areas. And here is just a real small example of what can be done to create, even though it's a very small riparian buffer around this small, tiny pond, it's going to be filtering anything that's coming off the road going through both this gravel area and the plants. And here's a lakeshore protection project. This again was up in Vermont. And I just wanted to mention this. This is a project I did with Pat Young and Jane Browerman from the Connecticut River Conservation District a number of years ago. And this was taken from a program down in Virginia. They had buffers in a bag. And what we did is put together a selection of different shrubs, trees, and perennials that are ideal native plants for putting in along a stream, pond, or lake. And as far as I know, they all sold out quite quickly. So just another idea. So the take-home message is simply that these corridors can play a very significant role in protecting our wetlands. They perform many, many functions and values, from water filtration, filtering out pollution, to habitat value for wildlife. And they also can be really important in terms of mitigating some of the impacts of climate change. And so I'll just leave you with that, and I'll stop there. So let's see. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think I can take any questions that anybody might have, if you want to put them into the chat box.
Hi, this is Jane. I'm trying to find how to unmute myself. That was a great presentation, Juliana. I am going to have Maura read off some questions. Maura is my coworker, Maura Roby. I gave her the admin privileges for this workshop, and so she's got the view of what questions you're asking. So if you have questions, please ask them in chat.
Okay, sorry. I did get one that is, does the buffer for wildlife habitat need to be 300 per bank, 300 feet per bank, or total?
It really depends on what the animal is. So when they talk about a 300-foot buffer, that's in each direction. So essentially, you're looking at like 600 feet total. But those are going to be for larger animals, right? If you're thinking about, for example, birds or shading the water for fish, it can be much shorter. So again, it just depends on what the organism is. But when we talk about a 15 or 30-foot buffer width, we're talking about it in one direction.
Okay.
Other questions?
No, there was just somebody thought that there was a trout on one of the slides and they wanted to know if it was mounted.
Oh, no, it was not. That was a
Okay.
brook trout. Yep.
Okay, that's it
That
for
hopefully
now.
went back in the water.
A couple more
Well,
questions.
if there aren't any more questions, good.
Well, there's actually one more. Can you hear me?
Yes. I can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. How effective is planting along the bank cooling the stream?
So you need shrubs and trees in order to shade the water along the stream. And it can actually be extremely effective. And that's why you see Trout Unlimited doing a great deal of planting. A lot of times they've been using things like willows that grow very quickly, but it can be very effective.
Okay, that's it for now.
As someone who for someone who does water quality monitoring using stream insects, water quality indicators, they're also very dependent on that leaf litter falling into the streams, especially the headwater streams, as the basis of the food chain. So if you don't have leaves falling into the stream, you don't have anything for the grazers to graze on. So that's also, and those bugs in the stream are the food for the fish. So that's also important to keep in mind as well.
Yes, great point.
I just got a couple of more. I got a comment thanking you for the presentation. Someone is joining us from New Zealand, and they are part of a conservation group. They're part of a conservation group there, and will use a lot of this good information there. I also got a question: what vegetation is most effective at containing fertilizer runoff?
It's hard to say. So I had mentioned that iris are actually really good. There's been a number of studies out of Rutgers looking at nitrogen and phosphorus, and iris are really good at taking that up. And so I think it really depends on what the fertilizer is, what the compound is that you want to filter. And there's actually quite a bit of information out there, but a lot of the herbaceous perennials and the grasses are really good to take up those fertilizers.
Okay, and then I got another one that says many people rake their leaves into the river. Is that harmful?
Yeah, it really can be. When you're thinking about those insects, the fish, the aquatic habitat, that can really cause a lot of harm. You're almost overloading the system beyond what would naturally just fall in.
And it often clogs culverts and backs up and makes a mess.
Yes,
lots
there
of reasons
you go.
not to do that.
So I think that's all the questions for now.
Well, thank you, Juliana. I am so pleased with your PowerPoint. Would you be able to send me a copy of this so I could post it to the website? Did I lose her? Am I here?
Are you there, Jean?
I'm here
Okay.
now. I lost my connection for a moment.
Okay.
So anyway, we'll take down my screen, and now the next presenters are Patrick and Bette Zimmerman Smith, who are local property managers of a property called the Fen, good friends of mine, and I think you'll really enjoy this next presentation. So I'm taking mine down, and Patrick, you could put yours up.
Has us muted.
Oh, okay, Jean, now you can hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okie dokie. Can you see my screen?
No,
I cannot.
great.
Okay.
Cancel this.
We're getting there.
You want to go to that?
I do. Let's see.
Well, let me tell you a little
How's
bit
that?
about it. I do not see your screen.
You do not?
No, I do not.
Oh.
Maura, do you see it?
No.
Oh. How about now?
There you go.
Yes?
Yes, it's starting.
Okie
There we go.
dokie. Okie
So
dokie.
make it the whole thing.
I can't. It comes and goes. It comes and goes. All right, here we go. And we're off. Oh, wait. I'm Patrick. And this is Bette. And we're about to show you a series of videos. They're pretty short, 20 to 30 seconds each. And so it goes by pretty quick. And the cameras that we used were similar to these, or these. That's my wife right there. And these are called game cameras, trail cameras, and they can take all sorts of weather once they're set up. And that's how we got these videos. If you want to find out more about those cameras, this is a good place for the specifics of the kind of camera you'll be looking for. You can buy them there if you want, or you can go elsewhere, but it's very good for information.
And the price range is $50 to $1,000.
That's me setting up a camera in the meadow of this piece of property. This is Woodstock, Connecticut. Up is north, down is south. This is Roseland Park Road. These are all condos at Woodstock Meadows. This is Muddy Brook, leading into Roseland Lake. These, we think, are man-made for runoff when this was farmland. And the water still pours off of here into the brook. Our land begins right here, comes down to about here. It's 30 acres. When we drove by here, there's a tunnel of trees here. It's like overarching the roadway. And we saw through here to the meadow. And you know what that's like when you're here and there's this open light down here. It's so inviting. Oh, who owns that? Well, when it came up for sale, we bought it to preserve it. And we were very surprised at the amount of water. When it rains an inch or two, this whole place just floods. And we couldn't see the brook in some places, even though you're only 15 or 20 feet away, but we could hear noises like rapids, water running. And G. Pillow said, there are no rapids on this little brook. So what was making that noise?
At first we couldn't tell because we couldn't get in past the meadow. There were so many invasive plants. But this was the surprise.
The beaver dam. So then we lay down the pedestrian walkways essentially across the water. 1, 2, 3, all the way along here. You know, because it flooded so much you couldn't get across. This is going to be prominent in the videos, is what we call the tree bridge. It's an oak tree that fell across, all the way across, and the animals make great use of it. And some of the first animals we came in contact with on the cameras, bobcats.
And it's unusual to see a pair together. This is during the brief mating season. And she's pausing for her close-up. And they used the trails that Patrick developed in this, what was really a jungle when we bought it.
Here's one in slow motion coming across the tree bridge. Now this is the tree bridge. Let me get a little further. Bobcat crossing over, branch in the water. That is a beaver. And he's about to tell this guy what he thinks. Then the beaver goes under the bridge. Do we have raccoons? Yeah, we got raccoons.
I'm not a big fan of raccoons because they eat the eggs of a lot of birds, and they're kind of garbage animals, but they're there.
And you can see, this is, the river is right here. This is one of those man-made access for the water runoff. Look how thick this is. And this is what we have to cut through. I have to cut it at least once a week just to get through.
So this is probably a mom and all the babies, and they're rooting around there for crustaceans or worms.
And the river's in drought. This is the river, and that's grass that's laying down. This is usually all underwater. These three, we called my three sons because they kept showing up on the videos together, all three of them. Here's the tree bridge. And they're so still, and they're looking over here. This is the shoreline, and there's something in here. And it looks like they're at home watching the horror movie, and you're gonna see the actual breath of the monster coming up right here.
But we never found out who it was.
And this is just a beautiful scene in the meadow. Looks like southern England, a coyote.
The meadow's only about 3 acres, but a lot of plants and animals there. We let it grow up with milkweed, and we had a ton of monarch butterflies every year laying eggs there.
Here they are in the meadow when the meadow's grown up. Right here is the leader, I think.
And coyotes are a family unit. There's usually a breeding pair and maybe an aunt and then their kids.
Okay, this is the river in drought again. The coyotes come down, maybe they're gonna cross and maybe they aren't.
Nah.
Too cold, too dark, too muddy. Group of 6 in the meadow.
In the rain.
And here's one coming from the other side of the tree bridge. And we think it's a groundhog that he's bringing home. It's in slow motion.
Everybody's got to eat. It's probably one of the parents bringing it back to their babies. Here's another hunter.
Hunting bobcat. Somebody's in trouble.
Boing.
Turkey crossing the bridge. All these little babies.
You can hear them chirping faintly.
Now the path goes this way, a path goes that way, and a path comes towards the camera. And each one of the adults looks like it's taking point, while the babies in the middle are sunbathing or taking a nap.
And I think this is more than one brood because you'll see a bigger one come in from the left. We've seen as many as 28 to 30 turkeys on the property on occasion.
The river is right here. This is our path. Beautiful phones.
He's browsing, unfortunately not eating much in the way of invasive plants. They tend to prefer the natives. Although we have seen them grazing on some shoots of winged euonymus, which is one of our biggest problem plants at the Fen.
This is like the Garden of Eden, before there were predators or humans. It's just so peaceful.
And one of the reasons we wanted to preserve the property is we didn't want to see this just turn into backyards, and we wanted to protect the water quality that leads into Rosen Lake. So we knew by keeping it undeveloped, those riparian buffers would remain intact.
This is
a long-tailed weasel.
And he's doing the weasel dance.
But that's slow motion. If it was in regular speed, you would barely be even, it would just be a blur. Boing, boing, boing.
And this is a group of baby ones in slow motion.
Patrick's very good at figuring out where to put the cameras to catch interesting things. And we've seen some, we had no idea.
Here's the beaver still at work,
Yeah.
always working.
Without the cameras, we would have no idea the variety and the diversity of wildlife that are at the Fen. Because you don't see this when you're out there working during the day.
Here's a pregnant possum.
Very pregnant. Got a load in her pants.
And now the possum bus. And then a few weeks later,
She's slowing down.
They're getting bigger. This is just beautiful. Red fox crossing the tree bridge in the winter.
We've seen both red and gray foxes there, always alone. This is Mom.
Oh, now you ruined it.
I ruined it, sorry.
And kitties.
She had 2 babies last year. We also had a number of bobcats that were collared under the DEP tracking project. This year, they're only collaring them in Farmington, so we won't be seeing any more, but
This is maybe a few months later.
I think that's a teenager.
Gotta have a rabbit.
It's a good source of food for the bobcats and coyotes. And you can see that the edges of the stream are pretty densely vegetated there. This is a really unusual video.
What are they?
Fishers, a type of martin, or some people call them fisher cats.
There he's looking at himself. Huh?
But we've never seen a video of the babies.
And then there's one trailing behind. Mommy, wait for me. But he's swimming.
This is in slow motion. We never know what we're going to see on the videos.
This guy still working, and he's on his hind legs and using his front legs to hold that against his mouth. Gee, that's a great blue heron. He's going to come by again.
A rerun.
So I think I say to the great blue heron, I say, looking like you do, how are you ever going to catch anything? Anybody can see you coming a mile away. So it's 4:28 p.m. 3 minutes later. Hello, Patrick.
And that fish is going, what the? What happened?
He caught the fish. Okay, this is a fisher, and the variety of animals are about to go over the bridge as the water over the seasons rises up.
And they're all the same location.
It's the same spot, yeah.
Fishers are vicious. They eat porcupines. They flip them over on their back and kill them.
What? He doesn't even get his head wet. Watch this. Oh.
Is that a mink?
Yeah. No, weasel. This is the mink.
Oh, there. Okay.
See the water getting higher and higher? So where's my bridge? Well, it's right there, under about a foot of water. There's the beaver, but look behind it.
His little helper. Learning the ropes. That's a bug.
Oh. Grackles, I think, just passing through.
In the fall.
Yeah, beautiful. This is to show Oh, I just made it darker. But that's the tree bridge, and the bobcat's on ice. And look how low the river is. And now watch. It's a tree bridge. Underwater. Even further underwater.
That's a coyote. Oh.
Here's the tree bridge again, and the water's 4 or 5 feet lower. And oh, look at that little thing.
We're trying to get rid of as many of the invasive plants as we can. You can see some elderberry here and false hellebore on our side. The other side of Muddy Brook is not our property.
The deer walks right under it. And then there's the tree bridge again, underwater.
And you can see how fast the water's moving. Mr. Mallard.
This is the death of a camera, where I went, oh, the water won't rise that high. Well, oops.
And it was one of the really good cameras too. This is the last thing it filmed.
Across the tree bridge. Sometimes you make it. Sometimes you don't. Hang on. Hang on.
Raccoons are good swimmers, so they'll be fine.
So this bobcat kept coming back here, sniffing the snow. Watch there. Oh,
Boing! And these are jumping mice, meadow mice. We call them popcorn mice. There's deer mice and white-footed mice too, but these guys are much more fun. They have a longer tail, and they're very bouncy.
okay. So here's the bobcat. This is a bridge entrance to the meadow. That's a mouse. So he's had all that warning of watching the cat come, and yet he just stays there.
Oh, he sees it.
Real life. Sometimes animals are afraid of the cameras.
We have different kinds. Some have a
spooked by them. Some are low glow, no glow. It doesn't seem to matter. We're not sure what they can see of infrared. This guy, he did this a number of times. This is Nosy Parker. He doesn't mind the cameras. He's just curious. The coyotes do not like the cameras for the most part. You see those eyes in the background? This next guy is really skittish.
Ah!
The fox, he's curious, hesitant, but walks right by. Turkeys. Look on the other side of the river. They're over there too. It's so funny. Wait, is that thing on? Bobcat doesn't care.
Occasionally they pee on
Finally,
the camera,
the beaver took a break. Can you hear him?
like a little typewriter.
This is with a handheld camera, pileated, and the red streak on her cheek, well, it tells you that it's a female.
So that's the woody woodpecker, pileated, and we leave snags at the fen on purpose for wildlife. You can see her tongue coming out.
This is a gray fox, grizzled, dark snout, dark end to his tail. They can hear the sirens, dogs, coyotes, and an otter. These are otters going over the dam. So sleek.
We were really surprised how many animals used the beaver dams to cross the waterway. It was a highway, just like the tree bridge.
They have the grumpiest faces. Doesn't like the camera. Woodcock.
We've created some clearing areas for the woodcocks. But this was a very unusual sight.
Somebody is sawing in my camera. And they won't stop. Oh, gee. It's a beaver taking a break.
So up till now, we've mostly seen mammals, but
That's a ringneck duck. Okay, this is a wood duck box essentially, but they also can be inhabited by mergansers, hooded mergansers. So this was the test design. You can see my hand, this is all recessed. So a raccoon or a bobcat cannot get around this, cannot get over this, get over the other side, cannot get up here. That was the theory.
and he was experimenting with the type of box that could be mounted on a tree, because usually you have to mount them on a pole with a baffle, but he wanted to come up with something that was predator proof that could easily be mounted on a tree.
That's the wood duck. Those are the wood duck eggs. That's Mrs. Wood Duck.
With some of her babies that were birthed in one of the boxes. A lot of the babies get eaten by snapping turtles, though, I think. Or the egrets will also eat.
This is Mrs. Hooded McAnswer. Look at that hairdo. And watch this guy.
That's Mr.
That's Mr. And they do that in the box too. So here comes the bobcat. He wants the eggs. But they could figure it out. They did figure it out. It took them 2 years, but the bobcats and the raccoons got around it. So I started to design this. It became a cheeks box. So I put this cheek on it, and I couldn't reach around this side because there's a huge drop here down to the river, about 7 feet. And coming in between these trees, I just couldn't do it. And I knew the raccoon and the bobcat couldn't do it either. So I just did this, and then I put a piece of pizza in there to see if they could get to the pizza.
If you didn't have the cameras pointed at the box, we never would have even known that bobcats were trying to get in. We thought we just had to worry about raccoons.
So the raccoon, he can't do this. He can't make that. Watch his hind leg here. Here's his hind leg there, and here's his head. Think he can make it? Yeah, he did it. He got the pizza. So then I made it with 2 cheeks. I risked reaching around these trees, and now I thought, there's no way he could do it. Oh, now in slow motion.
And the splash at the end is him landing in Muddy Brook.
So sometimes the cameras, when it's dusk or dawn, do this. They go like mystical, magical, all white.
That's probably a teenager coyote. So you get color during the daytime, but when the light fades, it goes into infrared, black and white. Most of the cameras are like that unless they have a flash. And if they do have a flash, you're going to get color, but you're also going to get a bright light that spooks a lot of wildlife.
Okay, you win the prize if you guess what kind of dinosaur that is. It's a beaver with a branch.
We had to watch it about 20 times to figure it out.
This is on the lake shore. There's something under the ice there, and he's going to get it. But what he doesn't count on is he's going in the water too, so he flies away. He doesn't come back either. There's a fish there. Now out in the center of the lake, this is a young eagle. He's doing the same thing. He's trying to break the ice. He can see something in there, but he can't get to it. So he just flies off. This is kung fu fighting. They're having a fight about something. This is on the lake too.
For some reason, we get a lot of videos of animals peeing or pooping, and you'll see one of them pee in the background in one of these. There, she was peeing.
That's just like your dog.
Probably rolling around in a dead fish or some poop or something.
So this is, we've all heard this. Coyotes at night, yipping and a yapping.
It sounds like there's about 1,000 of them out there.
But you probably haven't heard this one. And listen to his song trails off with such melancholy at the end.
That's probably his mate.
So I think that's it. That is it.
And we continue to take videos at the Fen. We post them on Facebook. If you're on Facebook and you look up the Fen Woodstock, you'll go to our page. It's public and you can see we try to post videos every week. So
Were we talking to ourselves?
I
That whole
don't know.
time?
But if people have questions now. Anybody there?
Okay, Jean, you're unmuted, I think. All right, well, I don't know where Jean is, but somebody did have a comment that the pileated woodpecker was a male. The males have red mustache and red on the head goes all the way in front of the eyes. Female
Okay.
lacks the red mustache and red on the head does not go as far as the eye.
Oh, that's good to know. Thank you.
Can you read?
And somebody wrote, it was lovely to walk the Fen again. It was Lisa Davidson with you and Patrick.
Yeah, she's in New Zealand right now. And we try to hold a Walktober every year, so people are welcome to come along with us and walk the property. It is private. We don't have it open to the public right now because for insurance reasons. We do occasionally see trespassers on the videos and, you know, we appreciate people respecting that it's private, but we welcome you for Walktobers.
Okay, I'm finally unmuted. This is Jean. So frustrating to be pushing the microphone and not doing anything. That was fantastic. And yes, you did put in the six-legged pillipede. That was me with two of the Last Green Valley Water Quality Monitoring volunteers. We were quite aware that the cameras were on the property, and we decided to put on a little show for Patrick when he went out to check what he captured, and so that was kind of fun. Amazing stuff. It shows the diversity of wildlife that use those riparian areas along streams. And another feature that I want to point out is the log bridge. And sometimes we have conflicts when it comes to things like log bridges. If you're a paddler, that's an obstacle. But if you're wildlife, that's an enhancement to the habitat. So something to be thinking about. I know Chief Ranger Bill from the Last Green Valley is on here. He's an avid paddler, and you know, leave something behind sometimes is important, and it's a message that I'd like to convey to people. That was a fantastic thing. Thank you again, and I highly recommend if you haven't, if you have a Facebook page, you haven't liked the Fen, do so because they're always posting on a weekly basis new video captures from that property, and also the management they're doing. They're doing a forest management operation on that particular property as well to enhance the habitat, and it's just been great. So I'm going to ask Patrick to take down his share screen, and we're about to conclude. Are there other questions?
I'm sorry,
Yep.
Jean, what did you want me to do?
Not unshare.
Unshare.
A couple of questions have come in.
Okay.
So someone wants to know, they said that was great. How many cameras do you have set up at any given time?
About 8.
And we check them once a week. They're not, you can't monitor them remotely. You have to go and retrieve the cards and bring them home to look at them. Patrick's going to be giving a presentation at a QVC. It was scheduled for the spring, but because of the coronavirus pandemic, they rescheduled all the programs at QVC, Winnebago Valley. But maybe he'll be doing one in the fall, and they'll talk about how to pick a camera, how to set it up, and what kinds of cameras there are, and so that, and he'll be showing some more videos too, including like some examples of the 1,000 videos we get of squirrels, or like a branch moving in the wind. Most of them are motion activated, some of them are heat activated, so you don't get a lot of that, but you have to be careful the way you set them up. So he'll be talking about that at his class at QVC.
Okay, Bill Reed said it was wonderful and doesn't have questions, but thank you for your work conserving the fen. And I have a question: how large, in megabytes, I guess, are these videos, and how much space is needed to store these?
I think this whole, what you just saw was less than 2 gigabytes. And I'm not sure the numbers, because if you put them in slow motion, they get bigger. So I can't really, it's megabytes per video that came out to, I think, 1.87 gigabytes for maybe, what, 30, 35 videos?
It depends on the camera too. Some of them have higher resolution than others, so each video clip is going to be longer. You can set them to take still shots, but we like the videos because it's more interesting to see what the creatures are doing. And a lot of the wildlife that we showed were mammals and ducks, but of course there's frogs and insects and amphibians there, but it's just, you don't really see a lot of thrilling videos of a frog jumping by the camera. So we didn't include those.
Okay, and then just one more, that someone would like you to share the date of Patrick's talk at QVCC on the FEN Facebook page.
We will do that. They haven't started scheduling classes for the fall yet because they don't know where we're going to be in terms of the pandemic. But as soon as we know, we will put it up on the Facebook page, and we'll share it with Jean too, so she can put it out there.
Okay, I think that's about it.
Well, that concludes our program for tonight, and I'm glad for all of you that came to be part of it. And as we're going forward with the Natchog Healthy Watershed Implementation Plan, riparian buffers are going to be a critical component of the plan. Juliana gave us great examples of how we can, without regulation, but through voluntary action, plant the riparian areas to make them better for shore stabilization and for filtering properties. And when you do that with native plants, Patrick showed us what kind of wildlife uses these areas. So there's a lot of benefits. The water quality benefits benefit people who like to go fishing, like the cooler water that the fish will swim in. A lot of the streams in the Natchog watershed have brook trout in them, so let's keep it that way. So without regulations, there's ways that we can enhance these habitats, and educating people of why we should do this is probably the biggest challenge we have, because people love the view of the river and they like to mow down to the edge without realizing by doing so they're causing more harm than good. So thank you everybody for coming. That concludes our program, and as I said, we will be putting a copy of this on our Eastern Connecticut Conservation District website. If you want to show, anybody who wants to come see it, you can show them where the link is and they can watch it themselves. So good night, everybody. Careful getting home. Oh, you are there. Good night. Maura, you can end the program.
Okay.